Good morning. Today is Monday, the 9th of May. And today is actually the Monday after Mother's Day, Pastor Eugene. If it was up to me, I think every day would be Mother's Day. However, it's not up to me. And this is the day after Mother's Day. And interestingly enough, today we'll be talking about something that is actually very contrary to Mother's Day. We'll be talking about this agenda to rid the world of mothers, in a sense. And we'll be talking about the movement, the abortion movement. Is it a movement or is it just like a terrible thing? We'll be talking about abortion today. I think there has been a lot of hoopla as of late because of the draft that came out overturning Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court this year. And so we'll be talking about abortion, how Christians are to view abortion, and there's even the Roe v. Wade overturning draft leak, where we'll be going over all of that. And it's going to be an exciting one today, albeit very interesting. We'll be talking about all of those things. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast.
There's more than one Dear Church podcast.
Yeah, but this is the one. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
And I'm Thomas Jefferson.
What? Why do you have like a random? And we have with us Pastor Eugene Kim. And today is Monday, the Monday after Mother's Day. I call it Monday. And Pastor Eugene, this Monday morning, we're going to be talking about abortion. And the reason why we bring this up is just like we talked about in the what is that? The preface, the introduction. There is a lot of hubbub going around because of the overturning. Well, I guess not yet, but the draft to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision of the Supreme Court. And you actually preached a sermon on um, not the topic. You actually preached in the book of Psalms yesterday, taking a quick break from our first Samuel series. And we talked about abortion and the biblical view, what the Bible says about abortion. And so we'll be talking about that today. And so if you haven't heard the sermon, I would highly recommend that you go to, where do they go to listen to that thing? We have a CGS podcast and also on our website as well. You can listen to the sermon, and it may be, and it will be very, very helpful. And then you can listen to this podcast, the Dear Church podcast, as a supplement. So, Pastor Eugene, I wanted to just quickly ask you for a definition of abortion because I think it's getting a little muddled today. And so, I guess, what is the definition of an abortion?
We should say it's an induced termination of pregnancy because you could have a pregnancy terminated through miscarriage.
So, I guess in like a regular person's talk is killing a baby in the womb.
Yeah.
I know that this would be a review for some of us that heard your sermon yesterday in the book of Psalms, but I guess could we just talk about the Christian view on abortion first? Let's just lay the groundwork and talk about the biblical texts that talk about abortion.
I mean, I went over a lot of texts.
Yes.
There's no word abortion. Abortion is a modern word, but there are references to killing and sacrificing babies. There are references even in the Torah about, a life for a life. And if you kill a life in the womb, then that's still a life that you have to pay for. We went over in specific Psalm 139, that part where David recognizes the Creator creating him from inside the womb, making him from his soul to all his extremities, and really praising him for that.
I think, you kind of went through the history of abortion in a sense. You talked about how in the past, this is not, people have done this. Could you just kind of quickly review that as well?
And people have done this. I mentioned the Roman Empire, but there's also people in Carthage that did this. That means we have archaeological evidence of people killing their kids, sacrificing their kids for whatever reason, giving up innocent blood to idol worship. We see that especially highlighted in the Bible, where Topheth or Molech is the idol that
Hmm.
is an abomination to God,
Yeah.
which we went over in that sermon, so you could
Yeah.
take a listen to. But God hates abortion. God hates the killing of the innocent,
Mm.
especially in the womb, even outside the womb. Just hates the killing of babies. And so, yeah, yesterday's sermon I titled it "God Loves Babies" because God loves babies,
Yeah.
and we see now this incredible bloodlust that has been revealed because of the threat of a decision that was made 49 years ago. It's almost 50 if we went all the way to January, right, of 2023.
Hmm.
49 years ago, the Supreme Court decided to make law, legislate by saying that, a woman could have an abortion and this is a right that, or something to that effect,
Yeah.
that women get to abort their child. And this is something that a state couldn't stop, that we're going to endorse on the federal level. And for 49 years, it's been precedent. And there's talks of, if you ever heard of the word like stare decisis or a precedent, that's the talk. Since it's been there for 49 years, we need to continue to keep it.
Right. Right. Right.
And yeah, if it's a bad ruling, it's a bad ruling. Precedent or stare decisis really holds no weight. And it seems as though this ruling that has come out recently shows that at least five of the nine judges agree that it was a bad decision. And yeah, so that we saw that preliminary draft overturning
Yep.
Roe versus Wade. But the killing of babies has been going on since the beginning of time. It's because our desires have been corrupted. We don't know what from our left and from our right anymore, and people don't even know how to handle it. Yeah, I mean, I'll stop there.
I mean, and I wanted to ask this as we kind of, before we go into the specifics of it, um, what is this problem really stemming from? Because I think you kind of hinted in your sermon that this is a manifestation or a fruit, perhaps, of a deeper sin. Where is this coming from? Where is the thought process of abortion or terminating the life that is in your body? Where does this heart, this thinking, this ideology, where does this all stem from?
I mean, it all goes from, let's say, even the idea of sexual identity, understanding that we are not defined by our sexual preference or the thing like what we are doing, but rather we're defined by what God has defined us to be. Like, just a, I guess, an overview example. People now believe, and this is something that we went over in our book study with The Brave New World, right? By
Hmm.
Carl Truman.
Yeah.
Strange New World, excuse
Strange
me.
New
Brave
World.
New World is a different book.
Yeah.
It's a New Age book, right?
I read that one. Oh, I didn't read that one in high school. I had Spark noted it, but yeah.
Yeah, in the Strange New World, yeah, he goes over, a long time ago, even in the ancient Greeks, sex is something that you just did, but now sex is something that you are. So a lot of the things that's been happening is tied in with our belief of identity. This is who I am. So if you don't let me do something, you are denying my identity, and abortion is one of them. And I guess you can even look at modern day society's understanding of abortion, where if you don't let a woman get an abortion, then you're going to tie her down.
Yeah. Yeah.
This incredible lie that women, you are lesser if you are to have this child,
Yeah.
not you are fulfilling a grand purpose that God has when you go over. And we went over this a little bit and probably go over next week about how women were made with along with men to multiply, to have dominion over this earth.
Yep. Yep.
And so one of the key ways that happens is through motherhood. And one of the key purposes that a woman can fulfill is by being a mother or supporting mothers. And, we even saw that people who couldn't be mothers in Exodus chapter 1 were wet nurses. And when God saw what they had done by protecting the Hebrew babies, he gave them mercy and allowed them to have children of their own.
Mm.
So having children has been a been a really huge thing where God is blessing society and the world, and we have now twisted that. I think it comes a lot, from our feminist ideology that women should be able to work and nothing should hinder them because they should be equal to men.
Yeah, yeah,
That alone should, I don't know, put on some alarm bells that that's an insane statement. That's something incredibly crazy to think that women and men are exactly the same.
hmm,
And when we say equal, we mean equal in honor and dignity. We don't mean equal in roles.
yep,
But
yep,
because we can't differentiate between the two, people have lost sight of who God is. It really is the Nietzschean man come to life, and we're trying to define our own rules and laws. And by doing that, we are introducing chaos and deep darkness into society. And so, you know, just a really rudimentary example could be a woman wants to continue to work, have a career, but then, she has this relationship with someone which leads her to get pregnant, but then she's, just about to make it to some kind of level in her corporate world or whatever it is. So she should get an abortion, right? And today's feminist society would say, yeah, absolutely. Nothing should hinder you from achieving your full potential and your goal. As if you working in some like widget factory and getting a managerial position or something like that is the chief end to who you are as a woman. And so we have been deceived into thinking that like the highest goal to have in life is to be like a CEO or
oh
something to
yeah,
that effect. Um, it was when I was doing a children's program here in the church that I served in before. There was a little questionnaire that people could fill out, and I remember when I was younger, you would fill out this questionnaire, and one of the questions would be, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And people would write like firefighter. I wrote a doctor, which my dad, disagreed would be a good idea. He's like, "Doctor, no, no, you should be a pastor." But and then I gave that questionnaire to the kids, these fifth grade kids, and then I suppose it's not a surprise now. I saw CEO, CEO, CEO. I actually saw one person write paleontologist, which I thought was weird. So that stood out.
it's a good
But
one.
yeah, but the vast majority of kids want to be CEO. What does that even mean? What are you even being a chief executive officer of? That doesn't even matter to them. They just want to
Yeah,
be a CEO.
yeah,
What are you leading? What are you producing? What are you selling? What is your service that you're offering? That doesn't even matter. They just want to be CEO. And I think that's the generation that has grown up today. We just believe we are entitled to this role of CEO, and nothing should stop us from being that. So how dare you tell me what I can or cannot do if I think, that I mean that's the sentiment, right? If I think that this child is going to now hinder me from my career goals, I should be able to, effectively murder that child. That child should die
yeah,
for this great cause of me being, I don't know, mid manager of
mm,
some rinky dink company.
yeah. Did you mean Nietzschean Superman before?
No, Nietzsche and Madman.
Oh, they said Madman. Gotcha.
Madman.
Madman. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess simply put, and let me know if this is not or if this is too simple. Um, Abortion or the idea that children are not blessings but are rather curses or are rather inconveniences is at the root rebellion against God's command to be fruitful and multiply with their desire to do what they want instead of obeying God's command.
I like this. I like this back and forth. You
With
should
that,
you should keep on doing that.
no, I'm just trying to make it
Yeah, it's good. I
like
like it.
it is really interesting what you said about children not being blessings, but rather being inconvenient or curses, inconveniences. Because in the Bible, we see all the time that there are women that can have children, just like Sarah or Rachel or Hannah, and when they have children, it's such a blessing for them. And yet, it seems that we've adopted a worldview that's completely opposite of that.
Yeah, there's so many attacks. So the attacks are coming in from multiple fronts, like that Malthusian idea, which has been disproven, but people still think, oh, you already have so many people. in the earth, we're overpopulating, so who cares if I have another kid or not?
Yeah, yeah.
There's the other lie that the womb isn't a sacred place, but it's my place.
Yep,
The
yep.
womb belongs to the mother and the mother alone. So that bodily autonomy is what is just, it supersedes everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so Satan actually has invaded the secret place, the womb, that we read in Psalm 139. And that's an incredible curse now that has come upon us,
Mm,
where we are not producing babies. And people are now recognizing, if you don't produce babies, you will die as a society.
yep.
Your country, your nation will not survive. I forgot what the most recent statistic was, and I guess you could look it up now while I talk about it. But Japan last year had like something like 744,000. I'm just making some number up, but it was less than a million. Uh, their population growth was minus like 700,000, something like that, 600, 700,000. That's that's a big deal. I mean, let's say your population is I don't know, 20 million in your country, right? If your population is decreasing by 700,000 every year, in a matter of years, your country's gone.
Yeah.
You can't survive. Not only that, you even before it goes down to zero, you won't have enough people for any kind of production of goods, working, manual labor. None of that will exist. Your nation just won't be able to move on. And that's because we've given into this idea that sex is just for the individual's pleasure. It's not for the glory of God. It's not for, living out what God has commanded us to do. And that's why this abortion idea that it's now an individual or the woman's decision is such an evil, deceitful lie that we have to say this is wrong. This is so wrong, and it's destroying communities, it's destroying societies, it's destroying nations.
So I think I did some digging past Eugene, and there is a stat that says Japan's population falls by a record 644,000.
Japan's population dropped 644,000 to 125.5 mil in
Yeah, in
2021.
2021. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's dropping dramatically. At this rate, then we'll see Japan cease to exist in just a matter of a number of years if the rate continues. You just can't function
Right.
like that, right?
The those 14 ages 14 and below accounts for an all-time low of 11.8% of the total population, while people 65 and above make up a record of 28.9%.
Yeah. And when those 65 and above die,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a huge drop that we'll
Wow.
see in the population.
Wow.
Birth rates are a blessing.
Mhm.
Babies are a blessing. God loves babies, and He uses it. I think it's the one of the I think we said this before in our earlier podcast, but getting married and having babies is one of the best pieces of common grace that we receive.
Uh-huh.
It's an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah.
Us rejecting that, going completely against, is literally having judgment
Yeah.
brought down upon us. I don't know
Yeah.
how else we can look at it. Um, Japan ceases to exist, then us, even as a society, we lose out on a lot.
Mm.
Japan has brought so much to the world. Yeah, and yeah, Japan has brought you a lot, Sam. Right? We've had some good times there too. So good memories.
Oh, yeah, on missions.
On
Yeah.
missions, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. I'm talking about together, not alone.
I was wondering, do you think it just kind of made me think of, and I think this is, this is pretty public that Japan is a country that has a very low percentage of Christians. I'm wondering if the percentage of Christians has any correlation with the birth rate.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer. obviously, in the Bible, and especially where it says in First Corinthians 7 how like your family's made holy if one person believes, they're
Yeah.
sanctified, right?
Yeah.
uh, it doesn't mean that they're saved, right? So if a wife believes, it doesn't mean the husband is saved. He needs to confess and profess Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. He needs to, follow Him, take
Yeah.
up the cross and follow Him, obviously, individually. But what does it mean that they are made holy? Is your life is blessed because of the Christian. Because of the Christian, you see that the Christian isn't just blessed individually, that blessing overflows
Yeah.
out of their lives. So if you have and this is something I wish like communities would also recognize, is if there is a God fearing, Bible believing, gospel practicing and preaching church out there, it's going to be a blessing to the community.
Yep. Yep.
Um, the fact that there aren't many Christians there, and even people who think they're Christians are part of like these cults, like the Mormon Church or Christian Science Church and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, which aren't churches. It's just a sad state of affairs for Japan. And I was telling somebody about um, this article I once read about this one Japanese family, and it was about sex dolls. Because in Japan, I think the West is also going towards what Japan is doing with sex too, but in some ways, not exactly the same way, but in many ways. Sex dolls are a huge market in Japan. It's really weird, but this one couple bought a sex doll, or this man, the husband, bought a sex doll. They have one daughter together, and he like bathes with it, like spends time with this thing, and then the interviewer asked the mom, like, "Are you okay with this?" Like, well, I don't like it, but I'm not gonna have sex with him. And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, man has needs, and this fulfills my needs." And this was just like a family in Japan,
Yeah.
and then this is something that we're seeing
Mm.
more and more, not less and less of. This will not bode well for the future if you have a society that's confused about the role between a husband and wife, what sex really does, and how it's a gift from God. That common grace is being rejected, and now with abortion, it's like even the fruit of life, that
Mm.
blessing,
Mm.
even when you didn't deserve it, that is being outright rejected, and in the name of some crazy euphemism, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and I think in the book that you mentioned, A Strange New World, Dr. Truman does say something about culture separating sex from babies and just kind of the direction that our country is going. I think it is a moment for us to reflect on that. And also a reminder for us, I think, to pray for Christians in Japan, pray for churches in Japan, like you were saying before. I know that we have a missionary that we support in Japan. And so I think it's a great reminder for us to pray for the church that is in Japan to continue to persevere with the gospel truth. I think one of the biggest disagreements that people have when they talk about abortion is this question of when does life start? And I know that you mentioned this in the sermon regarding the different doctors that talked about when they believe that life started. But I wanted to just also ask too, is there anywhere in the Bible that we see where life begins?
Yeah, I literally talked about it in Psalm 139.
Yeah.
Why are you bringing it up again? What's your problem, bro? You want to fight?
No, but I'm saying so I know that life begins in the womb, but I think one of the biggest arguments is, well, life begins when the heart starts beating. Life begins when it's this many weeks or this many weeks. How do we know for certain that life begins at conception? How do we come to that conclusion?
We didn't have the science we did back then, obviously. They didn't have the science back then that we do now, I should say. And now we know. That's why biologists are affirming that life begins at fertilization, or we use the word conception,
Conception,
right?
yeah.
And so life does begin at conception. So as soon as the sperm meets the egg,
Yep.
right? This is Bio 101.
Yeah.
A new DNA is formed, right?
Yeah.
It's completely different from the mom or
Uh-huh.
dad. It's a brand new DNA. It's a
Uh-huh.
brand new human life.
Yeah.
There is no categorization outside of it has to be a human life.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Yep.
It's not a monkey.
Mm.
It's not a tree. It's not a non-living thing. It is a living
Yep.
thing that is a human.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even scientifically, we know this. In the Bible, it's chock full of this understanding that when a man and woman come together, they give birth to babies.
Uh-huh.
So, inside the womb, the mother starts noticing in a few weeks. However, like people knew even back then that they had a life in them, especially when we go through passages. Why don't we go through that passage?
Psalm 139.
No, Exodus. Um,
This is Exodus chapter 21, verse 22 and on. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her child come out, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judge determine. He shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe.
yeah.
So all those abortion doctors are getting punished.
Look, people, people have taken this passage and they've tried to parse it in ways where they don't want to say this is about life or abortion or anything like that. Um, it means that the little Hebrew rendering means the child came forth, the child came out. And when the child
Yeah.
came out, what happened to the child? And so if it was a wound, you would get to wound the other guy for wounding your child. If it
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
all the way to if it was a life that was taken, then that's a life that needs to be taken.
Mm.
And so I think in many ways this is more serious than the way we see it now
Yeah.
because a life is a life. And this is what the Bible is showing us about life and how seriously we ought to take life. People just don't understand and think abortion is just some procedure that's done. And um, if that's the case, if really that's the case, then the question really just comes down to, I think, simply asking who gave life to the child? Is it you? Do you get to take it away?
Mm.
Who gives life to the child? And then if we understand that God is the one that gives life to the child, then God is the one that breathes into the child
Yeah.
his image. And if you destroy that child, you are destroying his image. It will be no different than destroying someone that is also another person made in his image. I would say you should take it that seriously. We should start from there.
Yeah.
And if you don't start from there, I don't know where you would honestly start from. Well, I mean, what point do you want to start from? Do you want to start from, oh, woe is me, the mother is poor or something to that effect?
Mm-hmm.
Because even if we did, none of these arguments stand. If we look at these latest statistics, people are always yelling like, "Oh, if you get rid of abortion, all these poor women won't be able to get abortions." And then saw the statistics. You know what? Why don't we just say it? Why don't we say all of them here so that we're not just speaking anecdotally? I'm gonna give you a chart that gives you abortion rates by income group. So the claim is that, if you get rid of abortion, all these poor women will suffer. Okay.
Yeah.
There is no statistic that supports this. There is no science that supports this. That doesn't even make sense. But even that outright is a lie, right? Yeah. What's the statistic?
Okay. So this is the percentage at income level as percent of the federal poverty line.
Right. If you're at the poverty line or lower, if you're lower than the poverty line, what is your abortion rate?
So
You know how to read the chart?
no. So at 100%, that means you're at the poverty line.
You're below the poverty line. It says less than 100%.
Less than 100%.
All
So
right.
this is the percentage of women under the poverty line that got an abortion age 15 to 44.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 8.6%.
8.6%,
Yep.
right? This is a data point from 2011 to 2013.
Yep.
8.6%. What about 400% and above? That means you have an income rate of over $45,000 at
It's
least.
it's 31.9%.
31.9%. It has
Yep.
nothing to do with income level.
Yep. Yep.
Again, this is just a data point that people bring out. I mean, it doesn't even matter if this was true or not. The fact is a life, but they're just using blatant lies. It it's just being used to gaslit people because it's a lie upon a lie upon a lie. There's nothing true about this. Poor women aren't suffering because of like their inability to get an abortion. In fact, we know that societies that continue to have babies will eventually thrive because life adds to the community. It does not take away from the community because that's a blessing from God.
What if people argued that the reason why people underneath the poverty line or below the poverty line had a lower percentage of abortions was because they couldn't afford it? And so what we need to do is actually make abortion more affordable, and we need to use taxpayer money to make abortion more affordable for those in low income groups.
Which is what we've been doing,
Hmm.
which is exactly what the government has been doing under
Hmm.
Obama, and which this is where these statistics are from. This is from
Yeah.
the Obama eras, and this is something that we know was wrong. Like the Hyde Amendment's there. We
Hmm.
don't want to use government. We don't want to use taxpayer money to fund the killing of babies.
Yeah.
We know that there are support groups. Planned Parenthood got around it somehow so that they also get tax money somehow, which is incredible.
Mm.
And that, Planned Parenthood is an almost, it's like, there's a multiple of, I forget what the factor was. It was like 3 or 4 times of Planned Parenthood or like abortion clinics in poor urban areas than not.
Yeah.
They're just everywhere. And if you
Yeah.
go to a poor neighborhood, they just
Yeah.
want to kill those babies
Mm.
over there. And yet we don't see that necessarily happening as much as, let's say, in the upper or middle
Mhm.
echelons or income echelons.
I mean, I think, the reason why I brought up even um, when life starts and how do we know it's because that is one of the biggest arguments I think I've seen when you look at legislation all across the country. It's always about the number of weeks. It's after an X amount of weeks, it's okay. Whereas it's not okay after X amount of weeks. And so, what I wanted to just kind of talk about was, why Christians believe that life starts at conception. And like you brought up, it's the fact that it's a completely different independent being the moment at conception, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, what if, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when we say that, we are pro-life, well, I guess first of all, what does that mean? Because it's kind of divided. There's pro-life and there's pro-choice. What does it mean for one to be pro-life versus for one to be pro-choice?
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe there's a spectrum of pro life and pro choice now. It's not as clear cut as it should be. And so pro life or pro choice is just what aisle of what aisle of politics that you're in.
Hmm.
So pro-choice could be something like, well, I want to respect the mother's decision,
Right.
or pro-life could be, I want to deter mothers from getting it in whatever way possible.
Mm.
I want to make more options available to them for either adoption or, prenatal care or something
Yep.
to that
Yep.
effect. And that could be on the pro-choice side. There's also uh, abolitionists, like absolute abolitionists, who are on the pro life will say there are no cases where abortion will be okay, like zero. It doesn't matter rape, incest, it doesn't matter. A new life is a new life. So there are those that are there. So um, I think it really depends. So I'd rather not put someone in, let's say, one category or the other. I would say you have to be pro life if you're a Christian, but what kind of pro life is important to me now?
Right.
And pro-choice is just ridiculous. I hope that we establish that if you believe that you're pro-choice, then you don't care about the sanctity of life.
Hmm.
That God has put a life inside the mother's womb, and the mother's commission now is to protect that child so that it will grow well. That's the commission given to the mother. It's a duty of the mother to do so. To reject that duty makes you reject what God has ordained for you. And that's a huge crime. It's a sin. And to understand that in 2022 in this feminist society might be rough for some,
Mm.
but that's why the sermon was a sermon. First, you got to know Jesus. And when you know Jesus, you know his ordering and you see that his commands and his ordering is good and you want to follow that. And you are able to because of the power of the Holy Spirit. But if you try to follow it now, it's just nonsensical if you don't know Christ.
Yeah.
If it's the way of the world, then I should survive over anybody else. Why should I let a baby hinder me? Or why should I let a man hinder me or a woman hinder me? I can't let that happen.
Mm.
So it's about me. The Christian life isn't about that. It's about following God. And following God will mean that you sacrifice for the other. You live for the other. You die for the other person. And that's loving your neighbor as yourself. It really is exemplifying all these things that Christ has taught us and following that.
So, I mean, you said that there's a spectrum of pro-life and pro-choice, but I guess just if we were to just simply put it, would pro-life possibly be people that fight for the life of the unborn versus pro-choice would be fighting for the mother to have the choice to be able to have the child or not?
And I think pro-choice may be simple. Yeah, it's just you know people have given. So I may be complicating things, but it's for a reason because there's a veil that's been put over our heads.
Hmm.
And that is that we think that you could be a Christian and pro-choice. So
Okay.
there are people out there who will say, people like Biden, people
Uh-huh.
like Cuomo, will go out there and say, I believe that a life is precious. There is sanctity to life.
Mm.
However, I believe also that a woman has to choose it. It's not for me to instill my religious
Right.
beliefs on that person.
Okay.
So apparently, the sanctity of life is a religious belief, and that should be separated from my political,
Hmm. Hmm.
like whatever maneuverings or legislation,
Yeah.
right? So Biden and Cuomo are most notorious for using lines like that, but it was before
Yeah.
people did that before.
Mm.
And I think Cuomo made it big though, where he would constantly say that in his in his briefings and his interviews and things like that. And it really like swayed people.
Mm.
So it alleviated Christians when they didn't like the Republican candidate to vote for this Democrat who was going to let abortion like run free in whatever jurisdiction they would be in charge of, right?
Yeah.
And so people voted for people like that. And you see now the result of that. There's a craziness to this abortion that people are just losing their minds over because they think that they have this right to kill their babies. And so, yeah, there could be a spectrum inside the pro choice. There are obviously other people who think that mothers should be able to kill whomever or whenever, as long as it's inside the body.
Yeah.
People have called I've seen people on video call their child like parasites because they're sucking the
Yep.
life out
Yep.
of you. Got to get rid of it. Just
Yep.
insane stuff.
Hmm.
People who don't know God, who's been given into darkness. In the pro-life side, there. I guess you could bring it down to two things. There are incrementalists and there are absolute abolitionists.
Yeah.
Right? Incrementalists are people who will say like, well, let's put out a heartbeat bill.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so in
Mm.
6 weeks, you could hear the heartbeat. You can't perform an abortion
Yeah.
um, because that's one way we can legislate. How else can we legislate? Otherwise, it's very hard. So there's heartbeat bills, and that's becoming pretty popular. That's like a trend for pro-lifers now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, Absolute abolitionists will say, no matter what, you cannot abort the child. No matter what, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Once, like we've talked about, once there is conception, that's it. That's a new life. You need
Hmm.
to protect that life at
Hmm.
all costs. And in fact, because the life is so frail, it's so precious, it's in need of protection, we should all protect that child from any kind of harm that might come its way. And so there's that kind of spectrum to, in that sense within the pro-life cause. And I believe that a lot of people are incrementalists without realizing. They believe, well, maybe we'll just one battle at a time,
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the use of going all the way if you're not going to get it? If we could get this much, um, and then what's interesting enough, what's interesting is that that argument wouldn't work on any other murder.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
wouldn't work in any other murder like analogy that you would put out there. If it's
Yeah.
murder, it's murder. I
Yeah.
don't care if it's like at this point in life or that other point in life. You cannot murder,
Right.
and that's what absolute abolitionists will fight for. No matter what, you do not have an abortion. Now, of course, we are not talking about miscarriages. Miscarriages don't count as abortions,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
ectopic pregnancies, we don't
Yeah.
count them as abortions either. And so those are unfortunate, terrible cases where you would lose your pregnancy.
Mm.
Um, Parents mourn over that.
Mhm.
We know of people that have had miscarriages that they sincerely mourn. Like these babies have a name.
Yeah.
They're given names. They're buried. They have burial services.
Yeah.
There's worship services, and the things that we do because we know that this was a life, and now that this life is in the hands of God, safe, and
Mm.
not in any more danger. But there is a deep sense of loss because this was a life that was supposed to be in your family, but is no longer anymore. And so we all recognize this. And abortion is the purposeful inducing of, the destruction of an embryo or the fetus inside your womb.
Yeah.
That's why it's so evil.
How do you kind of navigate that though? And you brought up abolitionists and incrementalists. How do you navigate between the two? Because the reason why I bring that up is because incrementalists, it seems like they're compromising. They've come to a compromise, right? Where abolitionists, they only see this as a black and white type of thing. It's either right or wrong, and it's absolutely wrong. Um, an argument that I've heard before is that if we don't make abortion in any way legal, then women will go to illegal measures or they'll go to more dangerous measures to get the abortion anyway. And so stopping abortion isn't going to stop abortion. What it's going to do is it's just going to make women go through more dangerous procedures, um, like at home procedures to get the abortion that they want anyway. So how would you respond to someone that would have that kind of thinking?
Yeah, this is a very common argument that's put out. This is not an argument put out by pro lifers, it's been put out by pro choicers.
Mhm.
And that is, women's lives are in danger if you don't let them have
Yep,
abortions.
yep.
This is not the case. There is no statistic out there that supports that, insinuation or statement.
Yeah.
I believe um, the number that was said, which is pre Roe, was that five to 10,000 women died annually. But yeah, this is not true. Yeah, and so um, let's see. I have here in the Guttmacher Institute by 1950, you have about 300 women dying from illegal abortions. 300. It's not the 5 to 10,000. It's in the hundreds, but
Mhm.
it is in the lower hundreds. There are other statistics out there, like in 1921. Um, I'm sorry, hold on. 1964, rather, 264. 1965, 193. Um, it started going lower and lower. 1966, 160. 19, yeah, and just kept on going lower and lower. And so women weren't dying um, by getting illegal abortions.
Yeah.
By 1969, it was like 180 something
Mhm.
here. Um, I'm looking at the CDC document, and actually, The case fatality in 1970 that the CDC recorded, abortion deaths were eight.
8?
Eight. And so here, deaths from illegal abortion in 1972 were 39, and this is from the CDC. Deaths from illegal abortion in 1972 were 39. Deaths from legal abortion were 24. Deaths from illegal abortion in 1973 is 19. Deaths from legal abortion is 25. So more people died from legal abortion in 1973. But these numbers are so small, it's negligible, meaning they're not like huge numbers where we have swaths of women dying from abortions,
Right.
illegal or legal.
Right, right.
Women aren't dying from this. People are just lying to you about this. And when people are like, if we get rid of Roe, women are going to die. Women weren't dying.
Hmm.
Women are dying from legal abortions now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that if we, make it illegal. And by the way, the overturning of Roe versus Wade doesn't make abortions illegal.
Yeah.
It goes back to the states,
Right.
which is, see, this is like where you have 50 red herrings, and you don't even know which one to focus on because they're all red herrings. But it's just lie upon lie upon lie, and you're just busy trying to refute one lie, but it's not really something that they'll hold on to. They don't care about that. They don't care that Roe versus Wade isn't being overturned won't make abortion illegal. That's not what it does. It brings that decision back to the states.
Yeah.
And so the people get to vote on whether they want abortion or not by voting for, their politicians
Yep.
that will govern them. And so it's just lie upon lie, and people just don't care. So they'll just continue to spew out these lies. Like, what about rape and incest?
Mhm.
Did you know rape and incest make up less than 1% of the abortions that are out there?
Mm.
And even if it was rape or incest, it doesn't mean it's not a life, right?
Yep.
And I think I've said this on this podcast before, but if you have been convicted of rape, I am in the party where I believe that you should be castrated.
Hmm.
You should be locked up, castrated. You should never be able to have sex again. I think there should be harsh punishment for rapists.
Yeah.
But that life inside the womb is a brand new life.
We actually did an abortion episode prior, actually, during the election. And we talked about what rape victims said about abortion and how even rape victims would at times refuse to get abortions because they would say, how could I possibly do something to this life that's in my body when someone else has done something terrible to me? I can't do that to this baby.
Yeah, so psychologists have recognized that people who have gone through such a traumatic experience actually tended, it's not 100%,
Yeah,
but it was
yeah.
a super majority to 80% where they would say, because I've been violated in such a dehumanizing manner, I can't do something
Mm-hmm.
as dehumanizing as murdering. A wrong doesn't equate a wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't like alleviate a wrong. And so we did mention that. It's just a lie after lie after lie that people will say. And I want us to, I don't mind taking time here to debunk every single one of those lies because people will just hang on one until you debunk it, and then you'll see what else they'll come up with.
Mhm.
But I believe the truth will debunk every lie, and I don't mind, going through it with anybody or any one person or here on this podcast when they come up to you and ask you, well, what about this? What about that? I literally had someone message me and saying, why are you judging? Didn't Jesus say, judge not,
Yeah.
lest you be judged?
Yeah.
And I explained to this person what that passage meant.
Yeah.
And they responded, well, I'm not trained in theology like you.
Mhm.
That's the response. So
Yeah.
I'll sit there. I'll explain it as much as I can. Not because I want to make you look dumb. I really want to pull you over to our side.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Is I hope that people will listen and then really be convinced of the truth, because the truth is what sets us free. If we continue to believe in a lie, we continue to get tangled in its web, right?
Yeah.
What's that nice little poem?
Charlotte's Web.
What a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive.
I have never heard that poem. Is that like a Shel Silverstein poem?
Oh, you've never heard that?
No, I've never heard that.
Oh,
Where the sidewalk ends?
what?
Shel Silverstein?
It was by Sir Walter Scott.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
fancy
what a
man.
tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive.
Um, I'm glad you mentioned that because for this podcast I do want to just go over certain um ideas, thoughts that people may have as they argue for the pro-choice position. And even actually today after your sermon, people have asked me questions about this topic, and so I wanted to go into those things as well. But you know, when people say "my body, my choice" or "no uterus, no opinion," basically saying that males should not have a say in what women do with their bodies, does this argument hold?
Absolutely not. And I hope people will fight against this lie as vehemently and as aggressively they come out with that statement. People should come out. First of all, again, statistically, it doesn't make any sense because there are more pro-life women than there are men, and yet they
Uh-huh.
don't care about that statistic. But even if it wasn't true, it wouldn't matter.
Mm.
We talked about how in the 12th century, in the sermon that I gave yesterday, there was a rabbi who wrote a
Yeah.
commentary. Um, his name is Shlomo. Oh, I love it.
Slow mo. Oh,
Shlomo.
so
Yeah.
not like this. Okay.
It's Schlomo, I believe.
Okay.
Shlomo.
Slow
Yeah.
mo.
That was his first name. But Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak, he wrote a commentary on Jeremiah, and in it he mentions Topheth. And the part that really stood out to me, and while I was preparing the sermon this past week, um, I really did weep a lot. I wept a lot because of this particular uh, passage in his commentary.
Mm.
And I'll read it again. It says, Topheth is Moloch, which was made of brass, and they heated him from his lower parts, and his hands being stretched out and made hot. They put the child between his hands, and it was burnt. When it vehemently cried out, but the priest beat a drum that the father may not hear the voice of his son, and his heart might not be moved. I think it's the father's responsibility to protect his child.
Yeah.
That killed me.
Yeah.
Women only being able to speak out is such a lie. The
Mm.
father needs to protect the child. So my thing is, where are the fathers here? Why aren't the fathers protecting their child? It's because the drums are beating so loudly. And
Yeah.
so we need to be able to point out, look, there are these drums playing.
Yeah.
You got to be able to hear your kid. Your kid's crying out right now. You got to save your kid.
Yeah.
Be the father. Be a man.
Yeah.
These men are so weak now. And so it's such an infuriating thing to think about. However, in the sermon, I really wanted to be as dispassionate as possible and bring the passion here, right? But I wanted to be as dispassionate as possible because the Bible speaks for itself.
Mm.
And God's anger is there. When he calls it an abomination, it's not a small thing
Mm.
that he calls the killing of the unborn or the killing of babies an
Yeah.
abomination. And so this is something that we have to recognize. And so when people say my body, my choice, or no uterus, no opinion, they're talking crazy talk
Yeah.
because whose child is it? It's not just the mother's. Where's the father?
Mm.
Who's speaking up for this child? And if the mother and father won't speak up for the child, then the community needs to go out there and speak up for those that are in the margins. These guys are such hypocrites who think that we need to speak out for people in this margin, let's say a racially like minority, racial minority that's been marginalized somewhere, but not this minority. This minority, we'll just exclude. It's just
Mm.
whatever we want by our whatever standard that we make up. This is absolutely not true. Who's the weakest, most vulnerable in our society? Isn't the most helpless a child who's about to get their limbs ripped out by the abortion doctor because the mother has been deceived into thinking that this is going to make her life better? This will not make your life better. You will convince yourself. You'll try to convince yourself. You may go on, get a Grammy or something, or a Golden Globe Award or an Oscar, and then just, thank God for abortions or something like that, right? And we've seen that happen more than once now. But maybe you have to do it. Maybe you have to do it again and again because you need to continue to convince yourself that what you did was good
Mm,
because you got rid of that life for the sake of your stupid little golden statue.
yeah.
And this is what I hope people wake up to realize.
I think one point that I thought was really important during your sermon was when you talked about the beating of the drum. You also mentioned, the different ways that the world beats this drum today. And I thought, that was a really important point. And so if you haven't listened to the sermon, once again, I want to recommend that you do listen to this. It's found in our church's website and also our podcast. But, I think the reason why sometimes people might say, no uterus, no opinion is because they think that it's unfair. There is a huge disparity between what the law is forcing women to do versus what the law is forcing men to do. And so there's a tweet from Senator Mazie Hirono, who is the senator of Hawaii, and she tweeted this: I can't think of a single comparable thing that the government can do to men that even comes close to forcing a woman to have a child. Can you? So could you just kind of respond to this type of mentality?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I hope you read the comments that came after, but this kind of thinking is putting bodily autonomy at its highest peak without understanding what they're really saying. We don't have bodily autonomy in the sense that we could do whatever we want with our bodies. Secondly, that body is not ours. The body that's inside a woman's womb is not the woman's.
Hmm.
The woman has been given this new body to take care of by God.
Yeah.
God has commissioned and ordained. And so she gets a lot of things wrong there. However, by taking autonomy and placing it at the highest pedestal to an idolatrous level is what a lot of women have been deceived into thinking is good for them. No one has bodily autonomy to the effect where you can murder.
Mm.
That's not bodily autonomy. So if I go, I get to do whatever I want with my body. It's my body, my choice. So I take a knife and I inflict pain on your body.
Mm.
That's not something I'm allowed to do.
Mm.
There's no law that would allow for that, except for when it's the baby inside the mother's womb. And so that in itself is why the debate rages on because you put autonomy at the top of the list, that you feel like you are not fully, I guess, a human unless you get to do whatever you want with your body, which
Yeah.
is again a lie on multiple fronts. And it's secondly, I did say that it is not your body; it's a new body that God has breathed life into. And yeah, I want to keep on that point where people think autonomy is just something that we deserve, or autonomy is something that we ought to have, or
Mm.
that equals liberty. Autonomy is not liberty, and so people are confusing autonomy with freedom. It's completely not the case. And so freedom is within the bounds and restrictions of what within the law of
Right.
being um, protected, or protecting others, or protecting the vulnerable, whatever it is. And so understanding that, we should see that we should use our body for the other person's good,
Mm.
not use other bodies for my good. And there's so many things wrong with that, but I'll just do one more. One more is, people think bodily autonomy means I could have sex with whomever I want,
And
and
whatever these days.
whatever, yeah. And so whatever the consequence, I don't deserve.
Yeah.
So sex is no longer tied with the fruit of that sex, which is giving
Right.
birth, right? And so we want to completely cut that out.
Mm.
But nature, God, in both dimensions, that wasn't meant to be. You cannot cut sex away from reproduction,
Yeah.
or that's why we literally call it the reproductive system.
Mm.
We don't call it the sex system. And, maybe that's going to change too. Maybe
Yeah.
people will recognize, oh, this system that I'm having sex with is meant for reproduction.
Mm.
Maybe people will change it because they'll get angry too, because they
Mm.
want to distinguish between the two. And that is also a very dangerous thing. The idea of autonomy has been brought to an idolatrous level, which must be fought against.
So if it's wrong to separate the fruit of, sexual intercourse from sexual intercourse, then what does that say about contraceptives? Then is that the same thing? Is that on the same level? Are we separating the two?
Yeah, I mean, that's a different topic, I guess, but I think the Catholic Church thinks so.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
The Protestant Church doesn't think so, for
Mm,
the most part. I can't
mm,
speak for every single denomination out there, but planning, regulating, and trying to be responsible of when to bring up your child in the
mm.
way that is good, way that is pleasing to God, is a good thing. Many Protestants believe so. People can use contraceptives to a degree. I think we talked about it too, but what
We did.
degree is important?
Right.
Like Plan B would not be something that we would approve of. Any kind of abortifacient, we would not um, approve of that. We would never say any kind of abortifacient is good. So some put themselves out there, false marketing, but they put themselves out there as what do you call it, birth control,
Yep.
but they're really abortifacients. They're
Mhm.
really like Plan B pills and things like that. So they're just plain out lies, and they should go straight to jail. I mean, I don't know what else to say. They should go
Yeah.
to jail, and so we got to watch out for that stuff.
So I actually had a conversation about that very, very recently. And the argument was, well, Plan B, isn't that just like using a condom? Isn't that just a contraceptive? Aren't we, you know, isn't that birth control? What is so different between a contraceptive and Plan B? Could you just kind of lay out for us the difference?
I'll give you the simple answer. The simple answer is it a life that you're destroying? And if it's
Hmm.
a life that you're destroying, then that's abortion.
Yeah.
That is murder.
Yeah.
That's putting, death out there. And so I hope people recognize that once you have conception,
Yeah.
you have a new life that
Yeah.
should be celebrated, that ought to be treasured
Hmm.
and protected.
Hmm.
And now you have this responsibility. You can't let it go. You need to be able to be responsible parents, because that's exactly what you've become. If you did it under, let's say, not under the covenant of marriage, then
Yeah.
get married. This is why shotgun weddings was a thing in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
It literally meant that the dad was dragging you down the aisle with a
Mm.
shotgun so that you would marry his daughter,
Hmm.
so that you will be a responsible father.
Yeah.
You never hear about shotgun weddings now.
Hmm.
That's how far our culture has gone away from trying to connect marriage with babies,
Mm.
understanding that babies need a father and mother. And so,
Hmm.
if you want to plan it wisely. Be careful of which contraceptives you use. Again, if it's a contraceptive that gets rid of the fertilized egg, then that is a very bad. It's not a contraceptive.
Yeah.
It's abortifacient, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and so don't use those. And if you have in the past, then I would say, repent, ask for forgiveness. Ignorance is no excuse, and so repent and then stop using those.
Hmm.
Plan properly. And no, condoms and abortifacients are not the same thing. There's no fertilization with condoms. And so please understand that. And if you want to plan trying to be responsible parents, then great. Please do so.
So I want to ask just one more question regarding that. What if a lady were to say, and this is the lady speaking. When I took Plan B, I didn't know whether the egg was fertilized or not.
Yeah, I said it before. You have to repent. I mean, you don't know. So be very careful. If you don't know, if you're just stop taking it.
Right,
No more.
and it's the intent too, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole intent is to flush out the egg that was fertilized.
That
That's the
means you
whole
were sinning in
intent.
the first place.
Right, right,
Perhaps
right,
you've had an illicit affair with another person
right,
that's not your spouse, right?
right.
Okay.
Gotcha. You talked about ectopic pregnancies before. This has to do with abolitionists and also with incrementalists. Um,
Oh, it
with
does?
ectopic
Okay.
pregnancies, is it true that as Christians we can never, ever, ever say yes to an abortion?
Ectopic pregnancies and, the procedures that surround it, we don't consider abortions.
Right, because the ectopic
Mm.
the ectopic pregnancy is when the fertilized egg attaches to anywhere but the uterus,
Right.
right? Which is the attaching to the lining of the uterus would be a normal pregnancy. However, anything outside of that, perhaps even in the fallopian
You
tube.
were a bio major, yes? Fallopian tube, the vaginal wall, whatever it is outside the uterine
Yes.
wall,
Yes.
that fertilized egg
Mhm.
will not survive.
Right, right,
And
right.
in fact, if it's in the fallopian tube, it is a danger to the
The
mother's
mother, yeah.
life as well,
Mhm.
especially if it bursts the tube,
Yeah.
because that that fertilizing will not survive.
Mhm.
And so we don't consider those abortions. They're not induced killings. We're just making sure the mom is safe, and so that the fallopian tube or whatever it attached itself to will not burst.
It seems like if there's danger to the mother, then it wouldn't be considered an abortion, an intentional induced killing of the baby.
The baby won't survive no matter what.
I
That's the
see,
point,
okay.
right? And so either the baby surviving is not an option. So either you remove that, now danger to the mother's life, or you let it continue to grow, perhaps potentially endangering the mother's life. So this, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it is it is something that perhaps people debate. I don't know if people will really debate that. I
Mm,
think people are using this to maybe fight against pro-lifers.
yeah.
But yeah,
Then for a Christian, is there ever a time that abortion is okay? Because we just said that ectopic pregnancies, it wouldn't really be considered an abortion. So is there ever a time that an abortion would be okay, or is it always just a black and white issue for Christian?
yeah, don't kill the baby. I think that's something that we can just continue to say. Um, don't kill the baby.
Mm,
Yeah. Um, if it, we could go through. Let's go extreme. It was a rape. It's horrific. The guy should be castrated. Don't kill the baby. It was incest. That's terrible. Stop sleeping with your brother or sister, but don't kill the baby.
yeah,
um something, it was unplanned. You think your life is going to be ruined, have the baby, don't kill the baby.
yeah,
No matter what, we'll just continue to say don't kill the baby, don't kill
yeah.
the baby, don't kill the baby, don't kill the baby. um i don't know I don't know if we should get into this lie that the mother's life could be in danger. That has never been something that Christians have fought against. Like, oh yeah, let the mother die. No one
Yeah.
never said that.
Right, right, right.
And I don't know what instance I can think of where a mother's life would be in danger. We have uh, our technology is so good now. I would say it's rare to almost nothing, like zero, where a mother's life would be in danger. I guess there may be some rare cases that we can truly mourn over,
Mhm.
where they would have to make that difficult decision. And so people want to always use, let's say, an exception, one out of a million you know, to approve the million.
Yeah,
That's not the case.
right.
And please don't do that. Please don't fall for it. Uh, I think the default that we should always fall back to is save the baby.
Gotcha. Next, I wanted to turn to Roe versus Wade, the decision that was made many years ago, and also the draft that was leaked to overturn this decision. Could we just briefly talk about what it was even about? So, what was Roe v. Wade even about?
Roe v. Wade.
Yes, sir.
Um, there are a bunch of cases that we need to take into consideration. There's also Planned Parenthood versus Casey
Yes.
in 1992, but Roe v. Wade was in 1973, where the Supreme Court decided to just create out of whole cloth, is I guess is the metaphor, but just create out of thin air this
Yeah.
right to abortion,
Hmm.
right? And this is what the majority opinion, if and we saw that it was verified by um what's his name, the head of the,
Roberts?
Chief Justice Roberts affirmed was that the majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito was actually a real draft, and that it was in fact it wasn't just leaked, it was stolen. It was
Mm,
yeah, it was definitely something illegal that happened. And who knows what it was. We'll find out, I suppose. The truth will come out on
yeah.
the true purpose behind it. But yeah, Roe v. Wade did something that wasn't done before, where the Supreme Court made a law, which is not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to
Yep.
interpret law.
Yep.
And so they made this law that wasn't there. They gave a right to abortion, which was not there. It's not in the Constitution. And
Federally, right?
yeah. And no, even legislatively,
Uh-huh.
federally, you can make that law, but Congress didn't pass any law to
I see.
give a right to abortion,
Mhm.
meaning you can't turn down someone
Mhm.
from getting an abortion. So if it was a federal law, so it was always some kind of, it was in limbo to a degree because you can't just make a law like that. And so people would just get abortions through Planned Parenthood and things like that. But it was progressing where, can you force a doctor to perform an abortion, right? If a doctor can perform an abortion, can you force them? Because this is the law of the land. And
Mhm.
that's what people were debating. Like, how can you have doctors who have, had the Hippocratic Oath to murder children if they believe that that's actually murdering children?
Mm.
How can you have doctors, I don't know, give hormone therapy when you know that they're going to destroy the child going forward?
Yeah.
Like, there's all these things where it was just out there. It was very confusing. And finally, after 49 years, um, yeah, Alito wrote this
Samuel.
majority opinion.
Samuel. Good
Yeah,
name.
that is his name.
Yep.
And it's yeah, he basically dismantles this crazy case, Roe and Casey, both of them, and would reverse all this abortion law
Mhm.
that the Supreme Court legislated from the bench, which they should not have, or they couldn't have,
Right.
and it brings it back to the state level. It can again go to the federal level if
Congress.
the House and
Right.
the Senate pass that bill.
So what you're saying is that in Roe versus Wade in 1973, the Supreme Court went beyond their, I guess, there's the system of checks and balances where they went beyond their role to interpret law, and they instead created a law where it was now okay all across the country to have an abortion.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Whereas what the Supreme Court today, this year, is trying to do is overturn that law because the court was out of its bounds in creating this law. And so now we are turning this legislation back to the states, where the states and the voters in those states can decide whether or not they want abortions to be legalized in their states. Is that right?
yeah. Unfortunately, this is something that won't affect New Jersey, the state we're living in,
Oh,
much.
Philip.
Yeah, because of Murphy,
Yeah.
and yeah, we're the ones that voted this guy in, so that's quite unfortunate. However, there are many states who wanted to put out heartbeat bills and laws, and um, that's why this case went all the way up to this is the Dobbs case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and for them to rule rightly on the Dobbs case. And I think I may have heard that in the Dobbs case, it was going to be a majority of 6-3, where the Chief Justice would even join in that majority. And he just probably didn't put his name on this draft, either because he wasn't sure yet, or he wasn't going to do it because of his belief in stare decisis or whatever it is. But usually, the senior judge would write the opinion.
Hmm.
So if it's the majority opinion, whoever the senior judges would write that majority opinion. And because Alito wrote it, then a lot of people have gathered from that Chief Justice Roberts did not vote with the majority. And it would be very unprecedented
Mm.
for someone that's not senior to write the majority opinion. And so this is what's going on now. People are speculating, like, yeah, like they think the leak is from maybe Sotomayor's office or
A liberal justice, right?
another liberal justice.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so we'll see. I do believe that the Supreme Court has its own police force, right? They
Uh-huh.
have their own police force to a degree. What was it, like 500 people in there?
Oh my
Something
goodness.
like that. Yeah. And so they're there. As soon as the news broke out, though, I urged Esther to pray for the justices. So on Monday, when we found out, I just said, we got to just pray for the justices. So
Mm.
Monday night, Esther and I were praying for the safety of the justices,
Yeah.
because if they're harmed or if their lives are taken
Right.
before the final decision can be put
Hmm.
out, then I believe that the people will think that you could just do that, and
Yeah.
people honestly believe that. That's why like, even the White House has not commented
Mm.
on this leak. Rather, they keep on talking about, how important Roe is and how important it is that we uphold it.
Yeah.
And then when asked about, you know, people protesting in front of judges' homes, they didn't comment either. They just said they're
Yeah.
passionate people who
Yeah.
are afraid that their rights will be taken away.
Yeah.
Well, how about that's breaking the law? You can't,
Yep.
coerce a judge in their decision making
Yep.
by doing things like that. That's
Yep.
also illegal. How about talking about the law? But people don't care about the law anymore.
Yeah.
People are saying this was the law, this was the law, and you will break every other law because you just want this one. And that's where we came back to um, the ends justifying the means.
Yep.
People just want this end. They don't really care about law. They don't really care about what's right or wrong. They believe that this is an end they need to get to because it's their progressive ideology, and they'll get to that end with whatever means they can. And that's truly evil.
So I'm curious, a lot of people have been putting out this false narrative out there. A lot of people have been putting out this false narrative that overturning Roe versus Wade makes abortion illegal, which is actually not true. Maybe in some states, but it's not true all across the board. And so, what is the hubbub? What is the difference between federal and state law, and why the big uprising at the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
Yeah. This is why our country's so awesome. This is why I do appreciate how our country is set up. Federally speaking, we don't want laws handed down federally. We want laws that will govern by municipality, by township, by state. Locally speaking, this is, because who knows us better than our local community,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want some, non CGS church officer giving us rules. They don't even know our church, that kind of
right,
thing, right?
right.
And so this is why I do like how our country is set up. However, I think the big hoopla, like you were asking about, is the fact that anything away from this progressive agenda, I do believe in their heart of hearts, they know that once you dismantle this, the house of cards will fall.
Mm,
That's what they're really scared about.
mm,
Once you dismantle Roe, then you'll see that the states that support it and won't support it, how they will go. And you will see that the states that support it will continue to go down the drain. And the states that have taken away this, quote unquote, right to abortion, that put in the protection of life, they will continue to thrive because that's the way God has set up the world. This is not just nature, but this is also spiritual.
mm.
And abortion is an evil and great sin. And you will see the fruit of rampant abortion out there. Communities and societies will not be able to survive. People won't know between left and right because they will have blood on their hands.
Yeah,
And so we don't want that to continue to happen. And so, yeah, I think that's why the big hoopla is there. It's just a
yeah,
house of cards ready to fall. And I, for one, personally can't wait. Again, like you said, it's true that overturning Roe versus Wade will not ban abortion. I wish the Supreme Court would,
yeah.
because I do believe they have constitutional authority to
Mhm.
protect life, even life in the womb. However, leaving it up to the states will allow for people to vote on what they truly believe.
Mm.
And I hope that people will recognize this and Christians will stand up and vote for the right to life. There are folks out there who are confused because they live in a very, very blue area like we do.
Yeah,
And they'll think that, well, Democrats still have, a lot of policies that I'd like. Can I still
mhm.
vote Democrat even though they are pro choice? And so, yeah, I mean, we've posited this scenario before in our previous podcasts, but yeah, I mean, R.C. Sproul, I just said R.C. Sproul would rather vote for a communist dog catcher than a pro-choice person.
Yeah,
This is the fight of our lifetime. I hope people, especially our Gen Z and our millennials, will understand this. This is the fight of our lifetime, that we get rid of this heinous and evil law that has been put in unconstitutionally
yeah.
by the Supreme Court, who was there to, protect the Constitution. And so, yeah, I hope it's not just overturn. I hope people recognize that this was a grave evil that we have done over the last 50 years, where
Mm,
over 63 million babies have been killed,
mm.
murdered inside the womb.
So as we fight this fight, we talked about yesterday, or you preached yesterday, that our hope is in Christ, and that the gospel is our hope, and that the church should be uh, doing the Great Commission, right? We should be preaching the gospel to those who are around us, neighbor by neighbor. I'm wondering, of course, that is the primary hope that we have, and that is what we are to do as Christians. As we fight this fight, what other practical things should we be doing? Because we should be voting, and then, should we be joining protests at Planned Parenthood, or what should we be doing as Christians, supplementary to the preaching of the gospel that we should be doing already?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't mind that people go to protests. I don't mind that people have prayer vigils or, actual like prenatal care given to women. I think they're wonderful things, but I did say the primary thing is that we understand the gospel and we proclaim the gospel. We proclaim the holiness and majesty
Yeah.
of God. We proclaim his righteous wrath that will come upon those that will serve Moloch or any other idol, that will, kill others, for their selfish gain, their pride,
Mm,
and then mask it with euphemisms, whatever it is. And I think our primary objective is to make disciples. We are to go out and preach that there is hope, but hope only in Jesus Christ. And when people understand that, I hope people will stay and sit under a solid, reformed, and personally speaking, biblical pulpit where the preacher will week in and week out preach the word of God, the whole counsel of God, not holding anything back.
mm,
Um, I think people should join if they can. Whatever they can do, whatever they can to stop abortion completely.
mm.
Absolutely abolishing abortion should be the goal. Just like if it was slavery, we wouldn't want incrementalism in
Yep.
slavery. We want absolute abolition, and that drove people nuts. There were people back then who said, why are we doing this so immediately? It's going to crush our economy. It's going to affect distribution,
Mm,
our supply chain. All these excuses came out. They say, no, we're just going to get rid of it all. And by doing that, it was better for us.
yeah.
Oh, people recognize that if it is an evil, don't go incrementalist, go absolute
Mm,
abolitionist.
mm.
Because it's an evil, we must repent of it. There is no we're just gonna sin 2 times. I'm just gonna have 2 abortions a day instead of
Right.
3. That's not how
Right.
it works,
Right.
right? You go cold turkey,
Mm,
and you recognize that this is something that God desires. So there are people out there who are a little softer
mm.
and a little incrementalist. I would warn against that and say, don't vote for Democrats if they're going to be pro-choice. This is the fight of your lifetime. You will regret it. It will show up in your conscience. I guarantee it. And then either, again, you will have to use your own euphemisms or your own, backwards reasoning to get yourself out of it. But, it was in Isaiah 1, right? Where God says, come let us reason together. Continue
Mm,
to read the word, see how much God hates the killing of the innocent,
yeah.
abortion. And so fight against it with that kind of hatred. You need to be that adamant, that passionate, knowing that God is also that adamant and that passionate.
I wanted to end today with a pastoral question. For someone that may be thinking of having an abortion, perhaps someone that recently had an abortion, or not even recently have had an abortion before, how would you guide them as a pastor through this type of situation?
I mean, it depends, brother. It really does. It depends on where they are, how
Hmm.
I'll answer them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never going to. I will never ever counsel someone to get an abortion.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody would do that, that is a grave evil
Mm,
that they have done, and they need to repent. Um, I would say you would support this person in whatever way you can. It depends on what it is, you
yeah.
know. So some people can come up to, and then you're the one that said this statistic. People say, "Well, there's a there's a high chance that my kid will be born with Down syndrome, and I don't think
Yep.
I can handle it. When people come up to you, I would listen to them, pray with them. Um, as a pastor, it really is to empathize and join them in their suffering and their concern. But it also does mean you need to tell them the truth. The truth is that this life that is inside you is a gift.
Mm,
It is a blessing. It is incredible. It has this enormous potential because God has breathed into this life, and we should remember it as such. We should
mm,
recognize it as such. And so we should celebrate. We should support, not just you yourself, but if you belong to a church community, the whole church community will stand alongside you as you baptize your child, so that they will help you in your raising of this child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. This is something that we will covenant and promise to do.
mm.
So join that church community that will do this for you, and don't neglect really being affirmed and kept accountable by your church community. Does that kind of help?
It does. It
Okay.
does. Before we end this morning, I wanted to just give two quick resources that may be helpful as you think through this topic. A book titled "Abortion" by R.C. Sproul could be very helpful, as well as from the Just Thinking podcast. There is an episode on abortion as well, which could be very helpful. This being quite the heavy and highly debated topic, I'm sure there are many questions that our listeners may have. And so if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at cgsnj.org. We would love to answer them and just go through this with you, studying the word together as a church. And so please do email us at cgsnj.org for any other questions that you may have. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we hopefully will answer some questions that we receive, but we will also be talking about what is a female. I know we were supposed to do that this week, but
Woman.
what is a woman? I know that, we wanted to do that this week, but felt like this was a very urgent topic to talk about as well. And so we'll be answering the question, what is a woman? And Christine Park will be joining us. What a treat. Can't wait. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.
Peace.